Hey guys, how's it going? Today we are going to continue explaining the lore behind all of the Bond CEs in FGO. Today we're going to be doing the Riders. Let's get to it. The shapeless island of Medusa's myth is not a real place that we know of, but likely one of many spotted islands across the Mediterranean Sea. The island itself was, for a time, said to be littered with the statues of Medusa's victims, be they unwary sailors who had stopped or former heroes who had failed in their quest. In a contender for my favorite flavor of Bond CE, we have George's photo collection. It should go without saying that St. George never took any pictures because he was too busy fighting for Jesus. So in Chaldea, he grew fond of the act of capturing little moments in time. This CE is aptly titled What Can Be Left Behind, as a somewhat romantic idea that George wishes for us to remember all of the times that we spent together. Blackbeard's is much more in-depth than you may think, much like the character of Blackbeard himself. What is seen here is a model replica of his flagship, the Queen Anne's Revenge. Blackbeard had gained a serious level of notoriety near the end of his life thanks to his blockade of Charleston, but he also didn't want to be hunted for his entire life, so he decided to do something blasphemous and run aground his beloved flagship. With this action, he sought a pardon, got one, but eventually he met another pirate he knew named Charles Vane, and the pair partied on the beaches long enough for people to get suspicious of them. Blackbeard would eventually return to his old ways, which is what this CE is meant to symbolize. Despite trying to take the man from the sea, you can never take the sea from the man. Boudica's CE is a representation of rebellion against tyranny. After the Romans desecrated her and her husband's land, Boudica led a number of successful assaults against the Roman settlements. This all culminated into one bad strategic decision on her part that would eventually allow the Romans to kill her and her troops. While Boudica never got the victory she so deserved and craved, she is remembered today as a beacon against oppression throughout Great Britain. Usumidori, the name given to the sword of Ushiwaka by Ushiwaka himself, Usumidori means light green, and Ushi called it as such that it could cleave mountains while being as beautiful as a springtime mountain. Alexander's Bond CE is the encounter he had with a certain philosopher named Diogenes. Diogenes was renowned for his quick wit and intellect and a practitioner of cynicism. He lived in a cask with a singular possession of a bowl, which he eventually threw away after seeing a child drink with his hands. Alexander wanted to visit such a fascinating figure and offered to give him anything that he desired. In response, Diogenes asked Alexander to move away so that he could see the sun. This complete disregard for authority and wealth stayed with Alexander, and supposedly he is claimed to have said, "If I were not Alexander, I wish to be Diogenes." So there is a lot of discussion about Marie Antoinette's necklace, and I'm really not going to add to it because I don't know enough about it. During the waning period of the French monarchy, a plot was manufactured to deface Marie. Marie was offered a necklace of fine diamonds to purchase, but she declined. This led to a trickster called Jean de Valois Saint-Remy to forge her signature on documentations that acted as receipts, and then further claimed that the queen had refused to pay the crown jeweler for such a fine piece. The anti-monarchy sentiment was already high, so no level of truth was investigated, and the necklace became a key player in the eventual revolution against the monarchy. According to legend, on the return trip to see if her brother Lazarus had been resurrected, Jesus gave Martha a simple walking stick to travel with. That is all there is to the CE. The reason it manifests as a holy staff is that when she manifests as a servant, the Big J man allowed it to be imbued with holy power to assist her. It is possible that this stick was found in the Collegiate Church of Tarascon, which held a number of other relics that once belonged to Martha. From my research, there is no proof that a golden wheel was added to the ship of the Golden Hind, but perhaps there is more to this than just that. Let's start with the fact that this is completely historically inaccurate because the original Golden Hind would not have had a wheel at all, but instead something called a whipstaff. Wheels would become more popular in the 18th century, but note that this CE is called the Golden Rudder, not the Golden Wheel. This is also 100% a fabrication, so the real lore of the CE is that you were robbed of information much as a pirate was wont to do. Calico Jack was a famous pirate and the captain of the ship that had Anne and Mary on it. Calico Jack was ambushed in Jamaica after his crew had become so intoxicated that they could not move. The only two capable of fighting were Anne and Mary, who held the line as best as they could and fought with a savageness akin to a cornered animal. They would be arrested along with the intoxicated crew and captain, and Bonnie famously said to Calico Jack before his death that, quote, "If you had fought like a man, you wouldn't have to hang like a dog." Anne and Mary both claimed to be pregnant to stave off their executions for piracy. Mary would die in prison of illness, and Anne just kind of vanishes from history. It is stated that she was not executed though, so her fate remains unknown. Lamprey was the name of King Arthur's favorite horse. Therefore, Lamprey II is naturally the favored ride of a new King Arthur. This is supposed to be Santa's sleigh, which first entered the popular zeitgeist in 1821 thanks to a poem which depicted Santa Claus riding a sleigh pulled by a singular reindeer. The hippogriff is actually not Astolfo's mount at all, but rather the mount of his fellow paladin, Bradamante. It is the child of a mare and a griffin, and is strong enough to fly to the moon. It came into the possession of Bradamante after she defeated the sorcerer Adelante. The reason why it manifests with Astolfo is because Astolfo would often borrow the horse to search for things throughout his various quests. This spring is probably actually where Maeve died. She had moved to live on an island called Inclernon, and would bathe every morning in a spring there. The son of a woman Maeve had killed sought revenge against her and practiced hitting an apple off of a stake placed directly at the height of Maeve's head. Once he was confident, he took a piece of cheese and flung it at Maeve's head, killing her instantly. As to why there is a Triskele symbol there, it is because it is Irish. Believe me when I say that there is no agreed upon meaning for that symbol aside from it being Celtic in origin. Iskander CE tells of the famed anecdotal tale of the Gordian knot. The Gordian knot itself once belonged on an ox cart of a peasant turned king of Phrygia. It was so incredibly intricate that one could not make out from where the rope started and where it ended. At the time of Iskander's arrival, Phrygia was a province of the Persian Empire, and an oracle foretold that anyone who could unravel the knot would become the king of all of Asia. Iskander spent a fair amount of time examining the knot, trying to make heads or tails of how to go about unraveling it, when he suddenly took his sword out and cut it in half. Thus, the prophecy was fulfilled and Iskander would go to conquer most of the known world. The tale itself is meant to say that sometimes the most complex of problems are solved with the most simple, outside-of-the-box solutions. As you can imagine, Kintoki never rode a motorcycle, mostly because there is no petrol stations up in the mountains. However, there is a relatively famous art piece produced by the Hokusai School of Art of Kintoki riding a bear, albeit a non-golden one. As for his association with lightning, which is important to this particular CE, it is because his mountain witch mother was impregnated by a lightning strike produced by a dragon god. Or at least that is one telling of the story. The Ramseum is the name of the burial chamber of Ramses II, aka Ozymandias. This building took 20 years to construct and it was dubbed the Temple of a Million Years. Unfortunately, the location in which it was situated, along with its treatment by the early Europeans in the medieval ages, have left the temple nothing more than a ruin. Prydwen was the boat of King Arthur used by him to sail during his waterbound expeditions. Some of these included the search for a monstrous dog named Rhymia. It is used to pursue the Great Boar towards Trith, and supposedly is able to sail between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The ability of Prydwen to transform is not a Fate invention either. It was supposedly able to become a shield as well that bore the image of the Virgin Mary, so its transformation into a surfboard can be somewhat rationalized. Also, you will notice the Virgin Mary is also visible on the board. As to why Mordred has it, it's because she stole it. On first glance, you may be led to believe that Quetz's Bon CE is the Aztec calendar. Rather, it is an explanation of what the calendar is meant to mark. In the Aztec myth, the gods often attack each other, and in these fights have destroyed the sun, which in turn destroyed the world. However, they always remake the sun in the world, and the winner of the fight becomes the god of that sun. At present, there have been 4 previous suns that have been destroyed, and we are currently on the 5th, with it being formed by the god Nanahuitzan. Columbus's Bon CE is his favorite ship, La Nina. In actuality, this ship is called Santa Clara, as the tradition of the time was to name your ships after saints. However, the crew affectionately referred to her as La Nina as a joke on her owner's name, Juan Nino. La Nina was one of the 3 ships that Columbus led on his first expedition, and would be proven later on to be a relatively lucky ship, being the sole survivor of 17 ships during a hurricane in 1495. Obviously this is a parody, but according to its description, this mop is quite possibly the most powerful physical weapon in Chaldea. Described as having a handle harder than aerondite and a tip hotter than galatine, this mop could theoretically give even the fatal Gay Bolg a run for its money in terms of lethality. Nothing of historical merit is to be found here, just the trophy that was destined for the winner of the Ishtar Cup that was never given away. This is because after Ishtar was revealed to have been trying to use the whole thing as a summoning ritual for Gugulana, she was embarrassed after she failed and couldn't bring herself to cough it up. The Library of Ivan the Terrible is perhaps one of the greatest sources of knowledge of the medieval world, boasting volumes of works once belonging to Constantinople and the Library of Alexandria. It was a source of international knowledge, including ancient texts of black magic that supposedly Ivan was eager to try and learn. However, the library itself has since been lost. At present, it is believed to be under the Kremlin, but extensive searches have yielded no results, so this treasure trove of ancient wisdom has been lost to the ages for now. The shield of Achilles was specially commissioned by his mother to none other than the god of the forge Hephaestus. Achilles decided to return to battle after Patroclus was killed by Hector and robbed of the armor Achilles had lent him. This shield in particular is noted as having an extremely ornate and detailed mural pattern showing scenes in the various rings in the shield. These included the earth and the heavens on the outermost ring, 2 cities full of people, a field being plowed, a field being harvested, children pulling grapes from a vine, a herdsman defending his cattle, a sheep farmer, a great ball full of dancers, and the innermost contained depictions of a wild ocean. The English name of the CE is slightly off because it should instead be called the object that can hold the earth, as that is what the shield quite literally depicts, the various aspects of the earth. Ryoma's is the anecdote about his first meeting with Oryo. Supposedly, after climbing to the top of a mountain, he discovered a divine spear plunged into the head of a great dragon. He removed the spear from the dragon's head and did so without considering the repercussions of his actions and with little care for his own safety. This is meant to be anecdotal about how he was viewed in life, someone who was willing to pull the carpet out from under everyone because he believed it was the right thing to do, with little regard to his own life or well-being. This one is simply a meme that came to life. Red Hair's favorite food is carrots according to fate, and as such, receiving not just any carrots, but what is quite possibly the flying general of carrots from Red Hair shows a dedication to the master stronger than steel. Tea time with Rhaenys. While I would be mindful of accidental mercury poisoning, did you know that the concept of British tea time is relatively recent in terms of world history? It was created by Duchess Anna of Bedford in 1840, who would get hungry around 4 o'clock in the afternoon every single day because the dinner time was set at a late 8 p.m. To sate her hunger, she would request a pot of tea with a tray of bread and butter and eventually add sandwiches to it. The concept grew popular among her friends and eventually spread throughout the whole of the British Isles. I'm going to go out on a bit of a theory crafting limb for this one and say that we don't have all of the pieces to Da Vinci's puzzle quite yet. There are two ways in which I think we can interpret this CE. First, this is a new Da Vinci experiencing a new world where her adult self was often trapped inside, so going on this beautiful journey is simply her experiencing life to the fullest. Alternatively, this is a very early implemented CE that will come back into play later in the story when Da Vinci is killed off again, making the same remark as the final lines, "Everything is so beautiful, just like a painting." Something that a lot of people are unaware of is that piracy back in the day was not something so simple as a bunch of criminals yar-harring on a boat until they found people to attack. Pirates were essentially stuck on a floating house, which meant that maintenance and work on it had to be done. It also meant that you were stuck in the same area as your compatriots for extended periods of time. To prevent the whole thing going up in smoke and people killing each other, a captain had to maintain order. Bart was one of the first to revolutionize what we know as the pirate code. Funny enough, it was a different Bart who was credited for this invention. These were a set of laws that applied to every man on the ship, the captain included, and were laid bluntly to every member of the crew so that there was no confusion. The creation of Bart's Pirates Code spread to other ships and captains as time went on, who had the unspoken or looser rules, but now they could all point to something that they could collectively agree upon. So Carmilla's is funny. The Iron Maiden Vehicular Homicide Edition actually has a name. Carmilla calls it Lola, named after, in her words, a woman who entertained her in the past. In the tale of Carmilla, the main character is named Laura, but when you convert that into Japanese, it becomes Rora, which, when converted back into English, sounds identical to Lola. So a nice little mistranslation in this one, but a cute reference nonetheless. In the Legend of Mandricardo, he took an oath that he would not wield another sword until he gained possession of Durandal. Because of this oath, he was given the gift that any weapon that he did wield could match the strength and might of Durandal. For this reason, he can make his weapons more powerful, but they don't actually change into his sword of choice. Thus, the energy that is exerted can shatter whatever he uses to substitute for a sword, in the case of FGO, a wooden sword. The white bull that Europa rides is none other than the chief of the Greek gods, Zeus. One day, Zeus decided that he wanted to shag Europa, so he turned into a white bull and mixed into her father's herd of cows. As Europa was tending to the herd, she saw the mysterious white bull and climbed on its back. As you do, it then ran off with her across the sea, all the way to the island of Crete, where it turned back into Zeus and took advantage of her. She was then made the first queen of Crete and gifted jewelry by the gods and 3 automatons to guard her on her island. One of these is her noble phantasm, Talos. So pleased was Zeus with the whole affair that he took the white bull's form and added it into the stars in the form of the constellation Taurus. So for some reason I never put it together, but the armor that Odysseus wears is actually the legendary shield of Athena, Aegis, or Aegis. I call it the Aegis because I also say GIF and not GIF, so forgive me. The Aegis is the impenetrable shield belonging to Athena that, according to some sources, has the head of the Gorgon as its embossment in a golden snake-scaled exterior. The Aegis was capable of shrouding Mount Ida in clouds and creating thunder so vicious that it terrified men. There's even a sort of precedent for it being armor, as the Aegis in some myths is described as the breastplate of Zeus, despite Zeus very rarely wearing it. As to why Odysseus has it when it was never mentioned in any of his legends, supposedly Athena, who is shy in the FGO verse, gave it to Odysseus and then struck it from all records. Murasaki seems to have fallen down the sci-fi rabbit hole, which is good and all, but doesn't really make for a decent explanation. So I did some bonus legwork for all of you and attempted to identify the 2 novels that can be seen on the cover of the CE. The one on the right, I believe, is most definitely Natsu no Tobira, aka The Door to Summer, which I talked about in the last video for Little Joan Alter. Most of the results feature a similar cat, and the alteration between it being in a window rather than a door seems like a good way to skirt copyright. The second was more difficult because it's just a leg, a backpack, and a street with a bus. This one is a bit more of a stretch, but it could be Temple Alley Summer, though that is more of a horror than a sci-fi, but close enough. As for the one with the purple cover and some kanji, it's too hidden to tell, so if you think you know, please let me know down in the comments. We return to my favorite kind of Bond-CE with Nemo's group photograph with his Marines. This photo was taken immediately following the imaginary scramble incident as a commemoration of Nemo accepting you as a new master. CEs like this add a lot of depth to the character, and for that I appreciate them greatly. It's nice to see the little snippets of how our bond has actually had an impact on the servants, and makes the bonding process feel much more worth it. I'll take Pain and Suffering for 500 please. This is the wedding dress that Habitrot has made for her dream bride. After millennia of waiting and preparing, she finally has found that person she has always dreamed would wear her dress. That person is our dear sweet Kohai, Mash. As to whether this holds any folkloric connections, it does in a way but indirectly. Habitrot was a master spinner, but was disfigured for it, and as such served as a cautionary tale to husbands to not force their wives to do nothing but spin all day. If they ever make a life-size Habitrot plush that's to scale, I'm going to buy it, so please make that. My first thought for this CE is that the featured creature is the Leviathan, but they would actually call it that if that were the case. Instead, it is a sub-mechanical serpent reminiscent of how FGO portrays the Greek gods. So, this is either an aspect of Poseidon or something else entirely. The CE claims that it is the originator of the Loch Ness Monster, and Canis claims to have fought it in the Mediterranean. I double-checked and she has no dialogue directly mentioning the Leviathan, but a lot about drinking with people, so your guess is as good as mine. Liz dons a hoop dress and glass slippers in order to cosplay as Cinderella. The glass slippers of old fairy tales would only fit upon the foot of their owner as they were enchanted. Keeping with Liz's bloody nature in the tale of Cinderella, her stepsisters would actually cut and deform their own feet in order to force themselves into the slippers, but this was eventually found out and so the crows pecked out their eyes as punishment, which in terms of fairy tale punishments is getting off kinda easy. Tai Gong Wang gives us an explanation of his weapon of elegance, a divine iron rod with a mystical attachment that moves like thread but is as tough as a blade. This device is able to kill immortal beings by smashing them across the head. It also works on non-immortals in the same fashion. This exact device is not mentioned in the Investiture of the Gods, but rather is modeled after Tai's fishing rod with no hook. Dobrynja's Bond CE is supposed to be the dragon Zeme Gorniach. This is the three-headed dragon that Dobrynja felled with the use of a Greek hat. The tale itself is that Dobrynja completely disobeyed his mother and as such encountered the dragon. Initially, they came to a non-aggression pact so long as they left each other alone, but then the dragon stole a princess and Dobrynja had to get her back or be killed. The Bond CE though plays around with the fact that this is not Dobrynja and that the more popular story is about Dobrynja leaving his wife. In other words, this is just teasing her. Side note, can we get a scene for an event where all of these dragon mounts communicate with each other? Like Tarisk and Zeme and Onsen or something? Cool, thanks. Constantine's is his memories of his final stand in the fall of Constantinople. It muses on how so often in history we hear about losing battles but having a comeback and winning the war, but for this time no such story is told. Rather, this is one about people losing everything and how it was all meaningless in the end, leaving the losers with nothing but rage. Bakin's is his magnum opus, the Nanso Satomi Hakendan, a tale of warriors coming together to fight for the Satomi clan. The work took 28 years to complete and is still performed today in Kabuki Theater. The novel consists of over 100 booklets and is the single largest piece of Japanese literature. At the time of its completion, Bakin had gone completely blind and had to rely on his daughter to write as he told her the tale. Finally, I have absolutely nothing for this one, kind of leaving it off on a bit of a bad note. I searched through the entirety of the Investiture of the Gods and couldn't find any reference to a bird like this. From what I can find, there is no bird that attacked Daji and scarred her face. The only thing that comes close is a winged celestial who descends upon Tai's forces. What is interesting, however, is that apparently this bird makes friends with Kama's parrot and Semiramis' doves and they discuss war crimes together. That's not a joke, look it up. That's it for the writers. Let me know what you thought down in the comments. Next up is the casters, so be sure to subscribe to not miss it. For now though, keep your chin up lads, peace.